allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Except I'm not on the screen yet.
Okay.
I like that picture there.
Yeah, that's
Tuscany.
I can go with that, but
Oh, love it.
saying it has
All right.
internet.
Is that Tuscany?
Yeah.
First order of business is the approval of. Yeah. We're going to go to
Don't
Tuscany
First
on our
annual.
conservation budget.
Yep.
Don't get ahead of me, though, because I got to write all this stuff down because we don't have Donna, and I'm still
Oh, yeah.
trying to log on.
Yeah, bigger.
We can do approval of minutes, or you want to wait?
Just a couple seconds while I get us on the screen.
All right, you say so. This is beautiful. Yeah. Hopefully it'll behave for you, Jen.
Oh, good. Thank you. You can just put it in. Yeah, everybody gets a couple bounce backs. There we go. All right, here we come. There we go.
We're good? Okay, first off, we'll do the approval of minutes for 7/27.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Okay, we'll open up the public meeting with an RDA request from 50 World Crest Drive.
So, the only thing I didn't get, did you send me the NOI?
I sent the NOI plans
Okay.
for you to put up on screen, but I did actually just recently send you colored renderings as well.
All right, here we go. 2 attachments. Save to drive. Hold on, we're working on it. Meetings. We'll see what happens. All right, hopefully.
Although I do see you have some already wonderful looking pictures there.
Yeah, we have the pond. So the first is the RDA.
Yes,
This is what the pond looks like
currently.
today,
Right.
as of yesterday, actually.
No water.
Other side, pull up the,
Did they come, there should have been another email just recently at actually 6:15 I sent you. There was a reply on our emails from earlier this afternoon.
maybe they came in the same one. Oh, attached is the NOI. Oh, I've got them. Here we go. Are they showing up?
Yes,
Yeah.
that one showed up. That's the offsite inlet. The second one should be the pond. Perfect.
There we go. So which would you like up?
The pond. On the right, lower right.
That one? Oh, why is it not displaying? Hold on.
Thought it was.
Ooh, that's pretty.
We're back. Hold on.
Very pretty.
Done a lot of work at Rural Crest.
Place is coming around, huh?
Nice job.
Yeah, the rents are $7,000 a room now, you know, yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome. All right, well, good evening, folks. Kenneth Lania, Cornerstone Land Consultants, representing Royal Crest Estates, North Andover, LLC, an AIMCO division company. We're before you this evening to request a determination of applicability for construction to occur to allow us to, I'm going to say, repair the existing pond that is on site right by the exit onto 114. I'm going to say repair because ultimately, we had originally submitted this to you folks last year in September with a little bit of a grander drainage involvement scenario for the pond to actually provide a 15% increase in storage availability on the property. And ultimately, the cost for that became prohibitive to the applicant. We withdrew the applications, went back to the drawing board, and apparently as we went back to the drawing board, the pond kept getting worse and worse, and the Board of Health kept getting more calls and calls, and then it got to the point where the pond was becoming more of a detriment than a pleasurable recreational item. So our thought process was to come before you with an RDA so that we can repair the pond, make the pond an appeasing function for the property that is a very low maintenance item, because we all understand how difficult it is to maintain things on that property, and remove the vast drainage work that was associated with it so that we could in fact come before you guys under an RDA, as opposed to requiring us to do a full NOI and a considerable amount of work in that area. As you are aware, because we did do the foundation drainage at Building 8, I believe at the very beginning of all the redevelopment at Royal Crest back in 2012, there is a low depression isolated wetland area that's located between the pond and Structure 8. That would be the reason that we would have to come before this board. We were allowed previously to do work in that IVW, actually to connect the foundation drainage for Building 8, but it's our intention to not do any work in the IVW and actually stay outside of the 25-foot no disturb, and for other than just 2 pipes being installed, keep all of the work within the existing sidewalk that surrounds the pond. I'm not sure if you folks have ever been out there, but there is a concrete walk, finished exposed aggregate walk with that, lavender stone that they have all over their property that does surround the pond. There is a walk then that leads into a bridge made out of wood that then extends into a gazebo that's located in the center of the pond area. For, I believe, at least 2 years when I started working with AIMCO, they did have 3 fountains. 2 were, running at the time when I started, and then after 2 years, both those fountains were unable to function anymore due to an electrical issue. So ultimately, I think that really has begun the downfall of the pond and was the beginning of our discussions in our 5-year plan that we provided to the town as to an upgrade for the pond, which we were hoping to get approved last year and construct this year. But because last year was a struggle with financial, funditure for these types of projects, they've now pushed it to this year, and they are ready to go. With the advent of the Board of Health being concerned with just the health hazards of the pond being stagnant water and mosquito breeding, green algae, which I was not aware is very dangerous to dog population and can cause some serious harm to dogs. I know that Michelle Grant was really eager for us to get in there, get working, and try to redevelop that pond so that it's not an eyesore anymore or a health hazard. So what I had done is really did a lot of research, tried to come up with a way that I could keep this pond from being a reoccurring problem for not just the town, but also even for AIMCO as a whole on the property. And I believe through all my research, discussion with a good number of pond aquatic developers that we have all throughout New England, I've decided to design this with what I call a bog filtration system. It's a very eco-friendly design, and it would allow us, I know Jen had a question today, to not require the need of any chemical type additives in order to keep that pond water clean. What we would be doing would be, providing a new electrical service. And kind of cool part that I didn't realize is if you walk onto that gazebo, the structure under the gazebo was originally a control structure for the pond. And it had always been that way. It has all the electrical inside of it. It has all the original pond connections for the pumps. It has all the original water line connections for filling the pond. The only thing it didn't have was a connection to drain the pond. So what we're looking to do, and as identified by that blue line coming out of the pond into the blue circle to the northwest, is we're just going to be connecting a 12-inch drain line from that gazebo square structure in the center of the pond to the existing catch basin that's at the end of that parking lot. So it's a 12-inch pipe. That 12-inch pipe will be installed, and it'll allow us to drain the pond if we need to clean it or fix it or repair it, because right now there is no way to drain or fill the pond unless you use a hose or a pump. And right now we'd like to have it be a more user-friendly scenario. We would have the valve systems in the existing outlet control structure under the gazebo retrofitted into the new pipe, and then ultimately there is a water line from that pump house that feeds the gazebo. We don't know if it's currently functioning, but it's there. I would suggest as part of this RDA that we would like to replace it, just in case it doesn't work. I don't want to have you folks get upset with us that we would be connecting to that pump house. But currently there's an 1.5-inch PVC line with a valve inside the gazebo box that we anticipate is for filling the pond. Last year, we actually replaced the the irrigation well that's in that house. So the pond would always be filled from the irrigation well, which is an artesian well that's used for irrigation for the property. It'd be no drain on the town system. We wouldn't be filling it with any town water. And when we would be potentially draining it, which ultimately I don't see a need for anywhere in the near future, it would be drained through the outlet structure into that existing catch basin at a regular rate. Obviously we wouldn't drain the whole pond in one day. That pond currently holds 300,000 gallons of water. Okay. In the redesign, our goal is to take out the first 10 feet of the outside of the pond liner. We would excavate that out and install just 2 retaining walls, one on the inside of that 10 feet and one on the outside of the 10 feet, and we would create a 12-inch deep bog filtration. So ultimately the system works like this. The pumps are housed inside the outlet structure. Water is drawn in through the outlet structure, which I have a detail that shows you. So the outlet structure will be connected now. We'll actually be installing a square inlet in that outlet structure. Will cut into the concrete so that the pond will be completely level into the area under the gazebo. And we'll have 4 pumps in there. The 4 pumps will draw water in and then distribute the water around the bog filter system in that 10-foot section on the outside of the pond. And what'll happen is that water would be forced up through a pea stone, a gravel filtration system. We'll have 3,000 plants in that area around the pond, and those plants will then remove the phosphorus, the nitrogen, and all the nutrients that typically these algae-type bacteria thrive on, and the reason that everybody's pond turns green and you can't see through. And that system will be pretty much a standalone system. You initially install one plant per 3 square feet of bog filter area, and they obviously will germinate to usually get to about 1 square foot, 1 plant per 1 square foot around the 5th year of the development of the pond. And then we're actually going to then have them weed out plants. So you never really have to address adding anything to the pond after the initial design. You actually take plants out because they actually regrow inside that bog filter. I did supply some pictures of what a typical bog filter planting looks like, and I know that Jen had communicated with me that some of the plants that I had listed originally on the plan were invasive in the area. And again, some of the reason that I chose those plants is ultimately we'd like to have some hardy plants in there. This is going to be a year-round pond. It's always been a year-round pond. They don't drain the pond in the winter and fill it in the summer. I mean, it's always just been a year-round pond. But I do have a full list of plants that I can go through, and I figured tonight what we could do is ultimately, I know Jen had said there were, I believe, 2 plants that were considered invasive.
Yellow iris is invasive.
And I mean, I have a list of 25 that I can work with Jen to substitute in the appropriate plant matter. And again,
That's what we usually do. We usually have you and
Yep.
Jen pick out the plants. We don't get.
And again, what I had provided here was, after going back and forth with the property and Dan Milanazzo, the director of construction, and again, because everything was based off pricing. So all of these plants we could actually obtain for $3.50 a bulb. And based off of the area of the bog filtration, we need about, I think it's 3,300 plants on the initial plant. So their goal was to try to keep the plantings under $10,000. Just to give you an idea, this project, because of the knowledge of the Board of Health's concern, has already been put out to bid. The bids have already been returned to AIMCO, and I believe they're looking to try and award a bid by September 1st for construction.
You have questions? I'll go back to you in a minute, Jen. Let you review the stuff. Are you ready now?
I'll defer questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
How long will this project take?
So our goal, my goal is to have it done in 90 days. AIMCO's goal is to have it done in 60 days. So we want to be completely done with the project by November 15th.
Thank you.
They want it to be completely done by November 1st.
They're not in the construction business.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Two questions.
Yes.
The depth
Yep.
is going to change in the center section? Or
Not
just
at all.
on the outside?
Not at all. So actually, it'll get shallower because the current liner, so I didn't want to poke any holes in this when I was doing the original design. So I'm not entirely sure how this pond actually even holds water. Because when you drain it and you actually look at it, it's asphalt. And the asphalt has cracks in it in some areas that are almost an inch, inch and a half thick. But yet this pond still holds water. And
Ken, the water table's right
So
there.
I was just going to say that because the water table
well,
is there.
I guess I would tend to agree with you, but the bottom of the pond's at 238. The grades in that
Well,
the isolated wetland go down to 236. So they're 2 feet below. So again, I understand that there shouldn't be pond in the water and there could be a water table issue, but we clearly don't have water table issues now and it still holds water. It blows my mind. But irregardless, what we're doing is our plan is to put a new liner on top of the existing asphalt. We're going to waterproof it, utilizing the same Ecoline products that we used for the foundation waterproofing, and then we're going to put a concrete liner on top of it. So that I can freshly connect that to the bog filtration system that we're putting on the exterior of the pond. So it should potentially become about 3 to 6 inches shallower than it currently is.
The other question is the catch basin that you're hooking up to, is it
Yes.
existing?
It is an existing catch
Is
basin.
it part of the original drainage project that you had before?
It is not, that existing catch basin is not, no.
It's not bad.
But because I know you guys so well, I moved that catch basin offline and put a drain manhole where we're connecting, and the new catch basin will go right beside it with a oil and grease separator.
Okay.
And you can see that on the detail sheet right there. I identified the catch basin. And if you look on here, the catch basin's been relocated right directly opposite of the, we're gonna try and use the existing shell of the catch basin and just put a manhole top on it, and then I'll put a new catch basin in beside it so that we can keep that offline.
What comes into that catch basin? Just the parking lot
Nothing.
drainage?
Yep, there's no inlets into that catch basin, and it's just the parking lot drainage.
There's a photo of it. My car's parked next to it. Just-
And if you look at it, you can actually see that it does surcharge. So this is one of the basins on the property, and this is actually the beginning of where this drainage system begins to back up onto the property. So that pipe that we're installing is going to do two things. And this is the cool part about this project that I didn't elaborate to you. Because I'm putting in this bog filtration system, the pond will run normal, and you'll see plantings all around the outside, and there'll be a nice cascading water flow into the pond. When that drainage system begins to surcharge, water will come back up into that pipe and begin to fill the pond. So there's a second tier wall in the pond. So when that water surcharges back into the drainage system, instead of continuously flowing in the pipes onto the property and popping up out all the catch basins, it's my intention to have the pond now act as the storage area for the surcharge.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Like I said, I'm just reinforcing Jen.
Yes.
That operations and O&M plan.
Yep, absolutely, and
And
yep.
work with the planting plan.
So that was something I didn't mention to you, but I think there should be an O&M plan for the pond for the maintenance people.
Absolutely.
Something you draft up and submit as part of this filing, so that
Not a problem.
we don't have to worry that they dump chlorine into it at some point,
Right.
or that they have a manual that says how they're supposed to operate the pond.
Right, and they're not supposed to put any chemicals in it. They're very well aware of it. It was part of our training at the beginning of the year. And hence the reason that's kind of why the pond's the way it is. They never treated that pond. They did nothing to that pond. They just let it do its thing, and once the water fountains stopped working, the pond, there was nothing to even keep the pond remotely clean, This design will have aerators, 4 of them, in the pond, and 3 fountains. So the aerators will be connected to the pumps, and all that water at the bottom that they're located, because funny enough, the pond was designed fairly well originally. There's a crescent moon type low-lying area at 237.5 where they had secured those large blocks where the ponds were, the fountains were originally tethered to, which is the low spots. So water will get moved around on the bottom, so that'll stay clear. The pumps themselves are, they're like grinder type pumps. And then all that material will then go up through the bog filter and get filtered out. Yeah.
John?
I don't have any questions. Brendan?
I'm just curious. This
Yes,
is
sir.
a man-made pond.
That is correct, sir.
Just for aesthetic purposes.
That is correct, sir.
What a waste of money.
Yeah. I don't think Mr. Flally had any problem with money back in the day.
No, we
Maybe
did.
not, but are
Yeah.
these condos or are these apartments?
No, they are apartments.
Apartments.
Yep, and I would assume that at least as long as I know, they're going to...
Increases the rent because of shit like that.
Yeah. Well, what we're hoping is if we can make it maintenance-free, and get it covered under this drainage 5-year plan. And again, that's the reason why we're doing this project under the 5-year plan. We get to upgrade an aesthetic issue that's a problem. But yet we also get to utilize that large space, which I believe right now is a waste of space, for some additional drainage assistance to try and solve our current drainage issues on the property.
Was that done?
Yep, I'm all set.
Jack?
Stated.
Yeah. Eep, bleep. No questions? Okay. So we need to continue because of the plan list, the O&M plan?
I would ask if we could not continue, so I could...
So I think because it's not a public document, close and issue, kind of no submittal. I mean, the O&M plan can follow, and if you're fine with him working up the plans with me, then Otherwise, it would be 3 weeks until they got it done. If they really want to get started in the good season, then they should probably.
I'm only going by your recommendation.
No, well, originally, as long as, we can get the O&M
Yeah, absolutely.
timely and we can agree on some plants. I have to say, pond plants, not my forte, so
Yeah.
we'll have to we might need to call someone else.
Well, I've been dealing with a company called New England Aquatic, so they've been helping me.
Yeah, I know who they are.
Have you
but,
heard of them? Yeah.
Yep, but
So they've been helping me a lot with because I'm not a pond guy. I mean, even when we get into the biocell type
they're not even
plants,
supposed to be selling yellow iris,
I know.
so that's kind of.
it's awkward, right? The pond mega store.
All right.
If we can work it out, I'm fine with a negative.
Well, all right, that's a funny you say that. I designed the bog filter system large enough so that they could put fish in the pond. So it should work exceptionally well when there are no fish in the pond, but if they were to add fish, you're supposed to increase the size of the bog filter to 30%. And this one is designed for 30% of the surface area.
I'll save that. I'll save my comments.
Well, the people that live
More
there
cost.
have something to do.
Yeah? A little fishing,
Cook it up.
you know?
We won't go there. We'll get in trouble. All right, so we need a motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Well,
Well,
I'm
listen,
sorry,
well,
not
we have to
closed.
do a
Issue a
negative
negative
motion.
determination, number 3, by law only.
Okay, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
-3.
I didn't see
By
that.
law only.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
That's
I'll
unanimous.
abstain.
And one
So
abstention.
Sean and Deb?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and Jack's abstaining. Okay. Next one is 242 Norman number 50 Royalcrest.
So we had a little more, I had a few more emails back and forth with Ken about this, and I don't, maybe you had a chance to respond, and I just didn't
Yeah, I
see it.
didn't. And I got to assume that you got the old NOI application, which that could have been completely my fault because in this particular project, we had, again, filed this one back in September, but due to funding, it got taken out. And they're looking to, reapply this year, get it approved for a potential construction either at the end of this year when they get an influx of money or potentially next year. I had filed the NOI. I had the old NOI, had the new NOI, and Jen had brought it up to me today that the NOI I filed was the older one for some reason, the 2014 one, so it didn't have the wetland filling exposed on the NOI, so I respectfully going to ask for a continuance so I can clear that up with Jen. And then also, ultimately, I know Lisa had reviewed this previously, so I really do need to coordinate with Lisa on this project as well. But just to give you a quick overview, the property has 38 acres of stormwater that enter onto our property at the location of the wetland, which has been highlighted in the blue area. It is a very deep grooved V inlet that comes from the drainage off of Quail Run Drive. And you can see the two very distinct drainage channels that take that stormwater and run it directly onto Anco's property. It's uncontrolled. It's no pollutant removal currently in the status, and I don't know if you folks have been out there to have a look at this area. It is so filled with leaves and debris, the water actually runs under the surface. You can't even see it.
I
So
did a site visit. I don't know who attended. Did you go? Lisa went out.
I didn't go.
I didn't go when Lisa was there. I've been to this
We brought some of the commission out there,
Yeah.
I do recall.
Yeah. Yep, I
because
remember we
we're-
did.
It involves wetland clearing or 25-foot no disturb zone clearing to construct this.
and wetlands. So primarily, the way I had modeled this was similar to how we did the G-train, which was I want to recreate the wetland that's there, but I want to reshape it so that we can control the water coming on, so that I can clean it, run it through a biocell, and then have it enter into our drainage system. Right now, the plan always is do the G train first, because the majority of the water that was coming onto the site was from the northern section of the property and this eastern section of off-site. The G train just worked, best to get started with. But in large storm events, and I think we've all witnessed it, that pond fills right to the top. I mean, in a 100-year storm, 50-year storm, which we've been having more often than we potentially should, it completely fills up. And part of my thought process is as I pull away this off-site inlet water that comes onto the property, it will relieve some of the stress on the G-train pond system, because if you look at that now, a lot of that mulch that's in there for the biocell, because there's such a volume of water that enters into it, just washes right out. So I've already had to clean that outlet control structure a half a dozen times since we've installed that G-train project, because the mulch just gets washed away. So this will take away about 30% of the water going to that G-train at the original storm surge, hold it back in its own biocell, and then release it into that piping once the G-train has had a chance to let its water recede. So again, it's a timing thing going through the property. So our goal with this one is I want to collect the pollutants and the large debris that comes from that subdivision. I don't know if you've been on Quail Run Drive, but it's a fairly steep hill. So that water just comes in, goes into the drainage, shoots out into those two channels, and shoots right into the piping system for Royal Crest. So I want to stop it, not let it go directly into the piping system, and then channel it both to the G-train and then around the outside of the maintenance facility. So as Jen had stated, though, to do that type of work, there's good amount of trees in that area where we're looking to do this work that we would have to take down. But again, our goal is to try and replant a good amount of vegetation back once we get through with the actual regrading and the sediment forebays. So I know it was something we were going to try and take a good site walk, last year when the filings were done. So again, I know we need to coordinate with Lisa, and I figure we could potentially set up a site walk, continue this one. Let me make sure that Lisa's comfortable with the drainage and how I've designed it, and then we can take a look at this at the next meeting.
Okay. Any questions right now?
Just a comment. I think a site walk might be a good idea, where we're looking. Well, we've got Montero Way and we've got Quail Run.
Correct.
That run down pretty close to here, and it sounds like you're looking to take down part of the vegetative buffer.
Correct.
Between the neighborhood and the.
Oh, no. On the Royal Crest side, not on the other side, not between those neighborhoods.
Not between Royal Crest and the neighborhoods?
No, I mean, technically yes, but very much just between the edge of wetland and the street, so very limited, maybe
Right, there's
25
a
feet.
triangle, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple 100 feet of vegetation between the backside of this project and those neighborhoods. Even in winter, you can see.
I mean, you can
maybe
see
the last
those
house,
back
that's
two
the one we
houses.
did with the pool.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
can see that
Yeah.
one, and maybe one other, but this isn't by no means removing the vast amount of vegetation.
Yeah, I mean,
How much, there's a 200-foot buffer. How much of that buffer is
Oh,
going to
there's
be
maybe a
removed?
400-foot buffer.
yeah, I would say we're only going into the edge of the tree line about, I would say 60 feet from the edge of the driveway.
Where you
Yep.
see the
V.
basin.
Yep.
Mhm. Mhm.
And again, we're not going to take all the trees down. My goal, and if you actually went out there recently, you would have seen the orange marks on the trees.
Mhm.
I don't know if you saw them, but I had gone out there and actually marked the vegetation in anticipation of us setting up a site walk. So all of the trees that we intend to remove, or that I intend to tell the client to remove, have all been marked with an orange spot. So that way we can go out there, take a look at them, and again, there's some give-take here. This isn't a drainage project where, I have to do this size basin in order to make the drainage work. This already is overtaxed by the drainage. Everything we're doing on this property with the 5-year plan is to assist and make it better. We're never going to make it perfect, but if we can make it better, then all the better for not just our property, but everybody on the Berkeley Street side and the outlet side, so then they're not getting that entire push right away on the original storm surge. So.
All right, any other questions? Motion to continue?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, guys. Good seeing you.
So when you get me send directly to Lisa the
Yes.
actual filing, and
Yep.
then just get me the updated.
Perfect, and then I'll send the O&M. So what I'm going to do is probably just add it to the site O&M. I have an overall O&M
Overall.
for the 5-year plan.
Yep.
So I'll give you the section for the pond,
Okay.
and then I'll just add it to their O&M
Overall,
manual.
yep.
Because they have a big, thick one with the swap.
And I'll condition that the department needs to approve the O&M and the planting
And the
plan.
plantings, yep.
Good.
And you and I can work on the plantings, whatever they
Learn a
are.
lot together.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Next one is a PCOC request
Go home and have some ice cream.
for 120 Cow Lane,
That's the word.
242-115.
So Heidi reviewed part of the overall subdivision, house and driveway not within jurisdiction, no violations on the site, and she recommends a PCOC.
Jack, any questions?
No questions?
Deb?
No questions.
Sean?
None?
Doug?
No questions.
Motion?
Motion that, oh, go ahead, Jack.
Move that we grant the partial certificate of compliance for 242-115, 120 Carlton Lane.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Next one is 242-1601, extension request for Katuitt Braden Street.
So this is the second half of the, Katuitt Street was originally 4 structures, 4 duplexes, and 2 detention ponds. 2 of the duplexes and 1 of the detention ponds was constructed under the original filing. You issued a second filing for these 2, which are on 2 different streets, one on Katuitt, one on Layden, and a new pond on Layden. The second structure on Layden and the pond need to be constructed but have not been. You required as part of that order that they close out the old order, and if you recall, that just got done a short time ago after a while. But anyway, it's closed out, so this is just a sort of, at this point, a regular old continuance request. The only caveat is that extensions are supposed to have the wetlands reflagged. They did reflag them 3 years ago, and if you recall, out there is sort of a massive, it dies back in the fall and grows up in the spring, and so right now you can't even get out there, and they can't find the flagging that they did just recently. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. So they do need to reflag, but it's kind of not feasible at this point. So I recommend continuing, but they are working on getting out there to do the reflagging.
Okay, we can condition that when you do the pre-construction, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have to do it. And I reviewed the line literally maybe 2.5 years ago, so there was no issues with the line. It's just a matter of getting the flags back out there.
Okay. Any questions, Jeff?
He's requested a 3-year extension.
Bylaw allows only 1 year.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have said
That's
that.
the only
Yeah.
issue.
No questions.
Sean?
All set.
Motion?
Motion that we grant an extension request of only 1 year for 242-1601 Katuitt Street and Leiden Street.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Next one is enforcement order update for 242-1428, lot 4.82.
Excuse me.
So at the last hearing, we had quite a discussion about what we would require for a plan to meet the enforcement order requirement of an overlay. We were sort of adamant about one plan, but I think Patrick's done it in 2. Oh, I'm sorry, Donna didn't copy those in 11/17, which I think I have a couple. There's at least one. I was in need of.
And we have both files.
Oh, yeah, so you might want to give them one or two of those. Actually, that'll be better for them than I'll hold on to the, we can have that one. So look, we now have two plans that outline all of the discrepancies. We met briefly to talk about how they should deal with this. This plan is the outcome. So I think I'll, at this point, let Mr. Garner explain the differences and how they plan to deal with them.
Okay, so to get you guys back up to speed, essentially, we had, and we've created a table on the plan now with details that, which I've been looking for, the deviations from the approved plans. For the rear stairs on units H and I, both of those were relocated. The actual total amount of square footage of stairs was reduced by about 30%. The replication area behind units F and H is smaller than we had indicated would be built several years ago, back in 2014. The two FEPs, the flared end pieces that were outfalls for the drainage coming off the driveway, are in different locations than approved. The buffer zone behind units H and I was reduced in width by some of the slope filling that was done. And there was a triangular piece of BVW in the rear of units H and I, and that was lost to filling. And then last, the retaining walls on only one building, unit H, were not built. So that is what drove us before you. And then the map that's up on the screen indicates essentially what we're proposing to do to remediate all of that. So on the top of the map in the center is the sort of a blue hatched area that's the existing wetland replication, and we're proposing to extend that and add additional wetland restoration of about 334 square feet, and that's in that brighter sort of blue hatch, tighter. It looks sort of like water. Then on the very bottom of the map, on the bottom sort of right-hand center, there's another big section of blue area that represents another 910 square feet. That too would be wetland replication that would occur in the back of unit I. And then behind units H and I both, there are sort of gray amoeba-shaped areas that have little X's in them. Those represent buffer zone restoration. And they amount to a little bit more than 1,000 square feet cumulatively between the three areas. In addition, on this plan, we added in the green shrubs that you see in the trees, along with the little fence that runs right up against the back of H and I, is the what we were calling the conservation barrier that was originally proposed when the plans were submitted in the very beginning. So we've added those to the plan at Jen's request to confirm, one, that they can be built, and two, to affirm that they will be built on this current iteration. And then last, I'm looking at unit I in the back of it. There's a sort of a black cigar-shaped object, and we call that the proposed relocation of the flow dissipator. And it sits right on top of kind of a gray one. They're the same size, and the gray one was the approved original location. And we're suggesting that it be shifted slightly. There's room to do so. And then Jen, if you'll cursor back up to the top of that plan. Similarly, between units F and H, we've got a black sort of bent cigar-shaped area. That's the proposed relocation of the flow dissipator. Its original location was to the left of it, and it's the gray one. So those are the changes and modifications.
Are you moving the outlet back? Sorry.
What was your
Where the unpermitted fill, are you moving that outlet?
Yeah, right here.
Yes. Yes. Let me stand up. I think it's going to be easier if I show the existing FEP, the flared end piece is here, right, and it's right beside the wetland line. It's offset by 3 or 4 feet. So we're proposing to pull that back here, and it would sit on the edge of the restoration area between these two areas. And it's designed so that any flow coming out of that would not actually enter the replication area beside it. Lisa and I did talk by phone, and I know Lisa went out on the site today and took a look at it, and we received an email saying she was on board with the proposed changes. As I noted, I think it was 2 weeks ago when I met with you, neither pipe outlet, the FEPs, actually functions unless we have a greater than 100-year storm. So they're sort of a safety backdoor. They don't show any flow in even a strong storm. But they were originally designed so that the porous pavement and the Coltec infiltrating units, although they were sized for up to a 100-year storm, if we got a hurricane condition where it rained for 3 or 4 days, they'd have a back door so that the flow would not overtop on the roads.
I did speak with her today, and she confirmed that in person.
Jack, any questions?
Yeah.
Do we need to go to the other plan?
I don't know. Let's
Sorry, there's more. I just,
The area, the unpermitted fill of 493 square feet behind H2, just to make sure I have this right, it looks like the flagging goes from T2 to T3 to T4.
correct.
The wetland flagging?
Yes.
T-series, okay. So that was filling of wetland.
That was filling of wetlands.
Okay. So it looks like the corner of building H2 is actually constructed in a wetland.
Well, it was permitted to be.
there is permitted wetland fill there. So both the area that is hatched, both of the areas hatched in red, actually, this one did not have wetland fill, I'm sorry.
This
Was permitted wetland fill, and there was additional permitted wetland fill.
Jen, if you go back up to building I, or actually this slide, if you could come up a little bit. The little notch right here is where it was permitted to be filled. The wetland had actually gone in a straight triangle on T.
More so.
T3 was probably about where the T is.
Okay.
But that was part of the original approval, and was part of what had been replicated back behind units A and B, way at the other end.
So what's the proposal for that unpermitted fill?
The blue below it.
Yeah, that we're
For some reason, your plan doesn't have it, but if you look at your smaller
Right here.
plan, you can see.
It's on the other page.
Oh, it's on the second page.
it's on sheet 2, page.
The blue below,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, what I didn't say is that one of the things that we did that over the last week and a half was go all the way back to the very beginning when you may remember this whole project is a 40B that goes back 8-10 years. And more, 25 years.
15 years.
This goes back to 1948, and it included Berry Street. We had 3 lots on Berry Street that were single-family houses, and then the condominiums that we're now focusing on. It was all part of the same project. It was all permitted by the ZBA as a single project. And part of the allowance to build the 3 lots on Berry Street included filling a fairly extensive area of IVW that was in the back of what's now the lots, the 3 houses. And to do that, we agreed to, or we proposed to create additional BBW to compensate, and that was created behind those 3 houses. So Tim Barlow basically did that, and when I went out to do the as-built at the Commission's request a number of years ago, we found that that had actually been overbuilt by about 5,000 square feet. So we then took that sort of that number into account, along with the amount that had been built originally when the condominium project just started, that's now behind buildings A and B, which was, I'm speaking from memory at this point, but I think it was around 1,400 square feet. We took all of those together, along with this little replication area that's between F and H now, added them all together, and then subtracted the triangle that we were talking about on building I that got lost. And the net effect is that we're running at a ratio of about 5-to-1 replication under this existing proposal if this was built out. So there's a lot of replication that's been done. As Jen mentioned, and I confirmed 2 weeks ago, the replication between buildings F and I, or F and H, has not succeeded. It's the shrubs are all flourishing, but the herbaceous that should be coming up as wetland hydrix plants has not worked. It should. It's at the right elevation. So that's going to have to be rehabbed, and we're going to have to analyze what's going on with that, and that's probably going to take some work with Jen and Heidi to confirm how we're going to go about making that happy. But for some reason, the wetland shrubs are all just flourishing. The wetland trees are flourishing, but the herbaceous layer has not been up to snuff.
Any more
I would say
questions?
the original soils were not good, what was put in there.
Probably so. In fact, Tim and I were talking about that. It probably needs a higher organic level, and it's
Way higher, had lots of stones and.
yeah.
The flared end piece next to building F3, it's shown existing on
Yes.
the plan. Is there, what I'm not seeing is where that was originally proposed.
Into the gray.
Gray
So
one.
that was the original inlet.
That was the original, okay. Oh, I see, into the flow dissipator.
Right.
Okay, so it looks like it puts it quite a bit closer to the wetland.
Yeah, it's offset so that there'd be a berm, a narrow, shallow berm that would separate the flow dissipator from the BVW replication itself. But again, it's not really functional because it doesn't even get triggered with any flow until you're at a greater than 100-year storm. So it's there as sort of a nicety and to meet stormwater management standards, but it's not something we'll probably ever see any water in.
So Lisa confirmed today that anything that would come out of that pipe would also be cleaned and treated because it would have gone through the porous pavement. It's an
Yeah.
overflow device from the infiltrators or the pavement?
Well,
Or both?
it's going from the pavement and the infiltrators and
Right.
then out, so it's going through a whole series of, there's a treatment train that really,
So it's not an untreated discharge. It's closer than we would have normally allowed or permitted, but it isn't untreated. So it's clean and it's not likely to cause, the reason for the swale is so that there's no energy, but if there were energy, it would be.
yeah, it's almost like a settling area.
If anything, it will help with hydrology for the soon to be recreated wetland.
Yeah, every 100 years.
Or 25 is.
Right, under the current climate.
Not being familiar with the, the wetland line, I guess what I'm asking is an assessment of the new proposed restoration areas compared with the unpermitted fill. Are we in a better position or a worse position based on this change?
Would you like me to respond? I would say that, well, at first, everyone regrets seeing any fill, but this was a triangle, and triangular pieces are always prone to being maintaining a robust wetland than a triangle that ends up beside a condominium is more difficult. The proposed restoration area, the replication area, is not is prone to that, I believe, because it's going to be longer. It's a more desirable shape. That area is going to be able to be excavated to the wetland elevation easily. I'm sort of wandering around, but I think that what's proposed is going to work and might, in the long run, be a superior location.
I think that might be the case up behind Building F, but behind Building H, it looks like what you've done is you've filled a wetland that was functioning prior to the project, and you're proposing a replication area in an area that was previously not wetland. So
It was buffer zone, right? So we've lost buffer zone.
yeah, well, that's
Yeah, Jack, there's a twist to this too, and that it was a triangular shape because it was created by groundwater weeping that came out. There was a fair amount of slope right there, and there was a little bit of breakout that would add enough hydrology that the plants were wetland plants. Chances are that all of the work on the site, including the proposed retaining walls and the buildings and that sort of thing, would have substantially altered the groundwater flow that had been there before the project and eliminated that hydrology source. I'm
So
just
we shouldn't have
speculating.
permitted it?
I'm just speculating.
Pretty self-serving statement.
Well,
That was not-
I didn't go there. I was addressing the question, and honestly,
Wow.
but that was why you had a little triangle there. It was groundwater breakout in the spring.
Yeah, it was delineated that way, and that's part of the record plan. It seems like we're in a worse situation on that change next to Building H and I, as far as the proposed additional wetland restoration. Although you give us more than 100 more square feet additional wetland restoration compared to the unpermitted, it seems, if I did my math right.
I'm thinking we lost 493. We're proposing 910.
It's 400 more square feet.
Yeah, it's a little more than 400 square feet.
And we lose up top.
All right.
Yeah, and
We lost up top.
We're not going to lose, and if the replication succeeds, we won't lose in wetland restoration. But to Jack's point, what's now blue was supposed to have been vegetated buffer zone and will no longer be. So this wetland will not have the buffer zone that the original wetland had, so to speak.
Yeah, although it is designed currently to have a restored buffer zone.
Yeah, the restored buffer zone was what was supposed to have existed behind the retaining wall, but was altered and will now be a restored buffer zone. So that's no net gain.
because of the function of the buffer zone, yeah. That's, I guess my last question, and I don't want to hog the discussion here, but I guess I'm confused about what retaining walls were proposed versus what are now in place or what were currently proposed.
Okay, sheet one, which shows the existing conditions, shows retaining walls only on building H. So there's a retaining wall that was proposed that sort of went out toward building F.
Near T3, this one?
Yep.
Yeah.
So why were the buildings behind I altered? I thought those were altered because there was supposed to have been a retaining wall there and you graded back instead.
I think it's sort of dumber than that. We've gone back and tried to figure it out ourselves, and I think it's fair to say that Tim was simply erred in filling that triangle. He thought it was supposed to be filled, and he filled it, and the filling of that triangle took place 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, it has not been there for a long, long time.
But that goes to, Lou came out, we reviewed and pulled tape to verify all of the erosion control,
Right.
which should have been where the X's are, but clearly we're not, because
They
that was
must
all.
not have been, yeah, I agree.
But they were, because we measured them.
It used to be there.
Am I answering your question? I'm not.
Well, I mean, it's not really a question, it's just,
Okay.
we went out, we confirmed them all, so something's not right. Either the wetland flags weren't right in the measurements we took, or the erosion controls were at one point in the right place and were no longer in the right place, but, we were out there
Yeah.
together with Tim and with you and confirmed it all. So something changed.
Yeah, and I can't be clearer because it's been filled for a long time. I have no memory of the transition
2
between.
years ago, I would say, was when we confirmed
I think it's probably more like 3 or 4.
buffer zone.
It's been.
Maybe 3, but a minimum 2.
Yeah.
I would say between, because I've been like this for 2 years, so
So
it's
probably
been
3.
Probably 3, 2 to 3. something
Yeah,
like that.
and I don't know when it occurred, and I just simply.
Okay, so the retaining wall near building H2, is that constructed as
No.
approved?
No. The retaining walls for building H were not built. And that's part of the proposal on sheet 2.
Oh, okay.
Is to not
got
build
it.
those because
Okay.
there's.
You would need a retaining wall to retain the soil to maintain that wetland that turned into unpermitted fill.
Yes.
That sounds like an easy thing to catch in the field. Okay, then there's also a retaining wall between H1, building H1 and F3.
Correct.
Was that constructed?
No, none of the retaining walls on building H were built.
Okay, so basically we have, that's why I don't know why weren't they constructed?
So we did find the wetland fill between F3 and H1 over a year ago.
Yes.
We
Late
had occurred,
2014.
and there's a survey error somewhere in there that they came back for a modification on. So we did deal with F3 to H1. The fill between H1 and I is more recent and more recently caught.
Yeah, we came before you in, I think it was November of 2014, and reaffirmed the wetland line as it's shown here now. And in the course of doing that also, we got permission to relocate buildings H, I, and K slightly, because with the wetland confirmation and the confirmation that there was a survey bust, I think you were around during that, but it's so complicated. We found that we actually had an extra 12 or 15 feet of upland. And that confirmation and the change in location of building H and I allowed Tim to avoid having to build the retaining walls to make the grading work.
But didn't catch that the isolated, the
Right.
second isolated area. We caught at that point that the first isolated area had been, not isolated, but that the first area of wetland fill had happened. But at that time,
Yeah, we
H either wasn't constructed at that point, not in 2014, H
No.
wasn't there. So that was later.
So without the retaining walls, you've got that proposed additional wetland of 334 square feet, and you're not proposing these retaining walls. You've got one there between F and H, and you've also got one coming off of H1, which seems to retain some level terrace above it. that would allow for a low area that where a wetland would be. So what's, I mean, you tried to get a lot on this plan, and I get that. What's it going to look like out there? I mean, is it just like a steep bank?
Oh, no,
No, it's gradually graded.
yeah, it's.
There's no elevations on here, but it's very gradually graded.
Yeah, it's all 3 to 1 4 1 sloping. It's got a nice look. The 334 square feet is a direct effort to make the existing wetland replication match the size that was approved by the commission in November of 2014. It's undersized by that amount, roughly. Not to the exact square foot, but roughly that's the intent. The proposed replication behind building I of 910 square feet is just compensation for the lost triangle. And when I mentioned 10 or 15 minutes ago that we've got if this was built according to what's proposed now, we'd be at this 5 to 1 ratio. That's just taking the entire project into account, the entire losses and the entire replications. If we scratch the 5,000 square feet on Berry Street, we'd still be well over 2 to 1.
Okay, no more questions.
And I
That's enough.
will say that the replications, both on Berry Street and the replication area behind A and B, are really spectacular. And that's partly why I've said that the replication between building F and H is really, really not. Because up to this point, they've been wonderful. They're flourishing, they're functioning in every way as an original wetland area. This one needs work, and that's part of what we're saying would occur.
So how do you propose to make it work?
There's going to have to be complete change in the substrate that's in there now. It's going to have to go to a more organic material.
So you're going to dredge out?
We're going to dredge it out.
Replace.
I'd like to see some microtopography, little pockets of lower areas. And it's interesting because this, of course, directly goes up against the existing wetland. When you go out in the wintertime, late winter, March, there's standing water, and the pockets of standing water in the BVW 10 to 15 feet away from this wetland line. And this is built at or an inch or two below that elevation. So it shouldn't be flourishing, but the soils have got to be, there's got to be a problem with the soils. So that would all be taken out and then replaced with proper material.
An opinion, Jen, does that pass the smell test to you?
Yeah, the soils, I've been
I mean, are we gonna be
commenting
able to
about the
maintain-
soils for a long time now.
We've
that
all
they
been
didn't-
tracking this for about a year now.
But will we be able to maintain reasonable grades out there without retaining walls and still get the function of this replication area?
I think the replication area butts right up against the existing wetland, and so they can bring
Yeah.
it down to
I'm
the-
worried about the upland side of it.
Right, and so if you think about it from a flow perspective, the water still flows downhill.
Mhm.
So the hydrology is still there, the water that was supposed to be getting there is still getting there. It's just a matter of the right soils. If you don't have the right soils and the vegetation is right and it's flourishing, but what never came up was, there's a robust fern layer out there in the rest of the wetland, and all you had in this replication area was the plants they put in. Nothing was coming up herbaceously, and so it's definitely soils.
Yeah, so for 2 growing seasons at this point, we've come back in and hit it with a heavy
See, they put
mixture of
seed
wet mix
mix and
from New England
everything.
wetland plants, and what's growing out there now is crabgrass.
And they did go back and augment this year, but I don't think the augmentation was enough. I think what was in there originally was not right, and so it's never flourished. So I think if they go back and take it all out and start from scratch, they know how to do the right thing. So
Yeah. And to come back to your question of access, access will frankly be easier without the retaining walls. You couldn't get down there with the retaining walls coming around F and H. So if it has to continue being babied, it'll be easier to do so.
No more questions?
Thanks for hogging that, Jack.
we got it all covered.
Okay, no, you did an excellent job, thank you very much. Jen, a question for you.
So did I do well or did I do poorly?
Yeah,
You
you
did
get
well.
it at a boy.
You did well. Now, I just want to ask Jen something.
Bless you.
The restoration areas, will they work? Will you be satisfied with them?
I mean, they've created the others and not had a problem. So that, like I said, they know what they're doing. It's not that they can't, or whatever happened here. You know, if they take it out and start again and do it just the way they did the last ones, we shouldn't have an issue. You didn't have any leftover soils to be using
It's
on the last
soils.
ones.
No, that's the whole problem, so we're going to have to.
They're going to have to find the material somewhere else. So you had replicated soils to use last time. So they had
Yeah.
soils from the site to put in the prior restoration areas, and that's always the way you want to do it. You alter whatever wetland you need to alter, and you stockpile those soils, and then you go back and use them in your replication area. They didn't have those soils to use, so whatever fill material or material they used just wasn't right for the site. So.
Okay, and this is just kind of a comment. You have an order of conditions. You're supposed to build the site according to that. How in the world did it get to this when nothing, it's kind of like a recipe and you have to follow it? No one followed it? What happened? That's my comment.
It's the monitor's fault.
Those are two of the questions I had, Deb. Now, you're taking all the good questions. So,
I'm flabbergasted because, I mean, you know, when I'm a cook, baker, and everything, I go by the recipe. That's just the nature of it, and I don't deviate from that. Although sometimes I am a bit creative, but you know.
I got to take responsibility for what had happened out there.
Okay.
We had the modification, and we came in, we got the mod. We ended up with some more upland, and I lost track of the plan. After that, I took some liberation and grading around the buildings because we had the greater space, we had more upland. So I deleted the walls thinking it would be easier to grade it and it would also look better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
But
really
I
what
think,
happened.
you know, to my point, you really can't be creative at this time. What was that?
I was asking Lou if it's less expensive to grade rather than do the retaining walls. Is that?
Oh, okay.
Is it less
Well,
expensive?
it wasn't only the expense, it also had to do with aesthetic reasons for.
Right, no, my question was just general. It
Yeah.
wasn't even pointed. It was a literally an honest question, whether or not it's, which one is
Yeah.
more or less expensive.
Yeah, it's less expensive to grade.
Yeah, okay. So I just, you know, I was kind of concerned because once you have something in place, you're supposed to follow that.
Mm-hmm.
And you obviously tried to be more creative.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from moving forward, I think you kind of should go with what the plan states.
We're back on right at Building K.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I have a few questions. One of them is I have an issue with the plans with no elevations. You know, it's great pictures that the water's gonna go to these detention ponds, but I don't know that. Also, and I'm gonna take a question from you.
Go ahead, no, take it.
Sean, we had asked that these were gonna be overlaid over the original plans.
So it took two plans to do that, but I think largely, from an understanding standpoint for Heidi and I, we've got it now. It's clear to us. I mean, it may be harder for you not having seen all the iterations in between, but I think the plans and the detail reflect what we were looking for. I agree, grading's probably one of those things that should be, maybe when you do the replication area plans, we see some grading.
Distances. I don't see any distances anywhere.
Yep, distances
Yeah,
to
Lou,
wetlands.
this is a direct overlay though on sheet 7, and you can see what I did was I grayed out the portions that were not relevant, and they're in the lighter color.
Foundations we have checked, we've always gotten the foundation plans, and the distances, Heidi is, you know, we get the plan, we see the distances, we go out and measure, we check the distances, they stake the buildings, we check the distances. Heidi's been, that's why when it came to putting on the stairs and Heidi was checking the distances, she knew that's when things started to go out of whack, and she knew something was wrong.
Yeah, Sean,
because-
I actually took the distances off last week.
Okay.
In the final iteration, it was so busy and so
Yeah.
hard to read, and I knew that the commission already had individual building as-built on every building.
So you can see from some of the stairs that they are closer than previously proposed, although.
The
as
existing
Patrick-
stairs are the green ones.
No, right, existing,
Yeah.
but the proposed is the gray.
Right.
So they were supposed to be farther away, but the way they've done them, they're shorter and less impervious, so to speak.
Well, I would just like to go on record that I'm pretty disappointed with this, because I think we worked pretty good with you guys. I know I was out there at least half a dozen times, if not more, not to mention staff, to progress from building F all the way to I, and total disregard of what the original plan was, is not what I expected for you guys. I expected, we had a pretty good rapport. Pretty much when you asked us to do something, we pretty much let you do it. So like I said, I'm just going on record as to say that I'm disappointed. Also, to me, they're all modifications, so if the commission's comfortable with it, so be it, but all these changes should be filed independently as after-the-fact modifications, so that there's got to be some type of, yeah,
Yep, fee.
for what's going on here. That's my opinion, and I'll defer it to the board, but those are my questions when I have feel like, what are yours, Sean?
Was there a monitor, and what was the monitoring schedule?
The monitoring has gone on weekly, and I think both Heidi has monitored it regularly, and I have as well.
You've got some proposed fencing, and I heard you mention it was from the original
Correct.
plan, is that
Yeah,
right?
the fencing is shown in green, along with the shrub line, and that's taken directly off the original plans and
Right.
superimposed on here.
But at this point, we have lost BVW in a couple of areas,
Right.
especially where you're going to be doing the replacement. I'd like to know my fellow commissioners' thoughts on getting more of a permanent barrier there at this point in time where we've lost the BVW. I mean, that's why I asked for distances, because looking at this, I have a hard time telling the distance from the green steps to the wetlands, how close they are, whether I'm looking at 20 feet or 10 feet. So that's the reason why I asked about the distances, because I'm really more than a little, I'm concerned about how close the buildings are at this point in time to the wetlands without some of the BVW that we'd earlier planned on being there, as well as retaining walls. Retaining walls within themselves cause a buffer. And without those retaining walls,
The buildings are exactly, literally within inches of what was approved in November 2014 by the commission. So the buildings themselves fit precisely with what
Right, but you
was
have two
brought
new
forward.
replication areas that are being built here that
Right.
weren't in consideration.
Well, the first replication area we discussed in November of 2014, and that's what
The
this...
top one?
Yeah, this top one. It ended up being built, it was approved by the commission to be a certain size, it ended up being built about 20% smaller. So part of the intent of this modification is to make sure it gets built correctly in terms of square footage. But the triangular piece that we've been spending a lot of time talking about that went up to the edge of building H got filled. And there's no way to walk around it.
Right.
It got filled. And it would have been caught eventually, because sooner or later the project would have had an asphalt
as-built.
on. And frankly, I'm glad we're here before you now, not a year and a half from now or 2 years, after the whole thing's completely finished and and occupied.
Yeah, agreed.
We haven't said so, but it's embarrassing to be sitting here in front of you. We didn't catch it, and it should have been caught. That's probably doesn't need to be said, but
Well, thank you for your acknowledgement. So what do you guys think in certain areas? Stick with the proposed fencing where they got the replication area, put in something more permanent? What kind of fencing is proposed? Is it posted rails?
Cedar.
it's a split, cedar split rail. That's what's used everywhere else through the project. It seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah, that's consistent with the rest of the project. It's encompassing the entire.
Yep. Do you guys have any stone wall barriers on the property?
Not
So
on
far?
this one. We did on Berry Street. On
Yeah.
Berry Street, we did the entire length
Yeah.
behind the homes.
They come out really nice, too.
Is the vegetation doing well behind the fence?
It isn't there yet.
Yeah.
No, it isn't there yet.
This
Yeah,
is the
this-
part that is not built up yet, right? I mean, you have
Correct.
foundations and it's on the far, as you go, I guess it's the easternmost part of the property as you drive down 114.
And back.
South,
I'm just thinking 114.
H is finished, right?
southwest.
All these buildings.
Yeah, H and I are finished.
H and
Yeah.
I finished?
Yeah, they're close to being occupied, or H is already occupied.
Yeah, those were my only thoughts at this point.
So you're talking about a wall here. A wall here. That is-
Where the shrubbery has been planted already along the fencing for all the other units, A, B, C, F, it's densely planted, and I think Lou will confirm, I'm sure he's seen it several times. It looks good, it functions, it works, and it restricts people from getting near the wetland. So
A.
it's not thinly planted, it's densely and well done, I'd say.
Yeah, the fence, this is farther away than A is.
It is.
I mean, A and B, it's literally right on the wetlands, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
yeah,
It's been a
right on
while.
top.
So, I mean, if they put the vegetation as thick as they say with the fencing, that's fine, but I mean, at this point, we're kind of talking major undertaking to put it back to where the
Yep.
plan is. They haven't even-
On the plan that's on the monitor right now, that building that's not labeled
On the
anything
bottom?
at the very bottom, is that building J?
K.
That's K?
That's K.
Okay. There's a deck shown on building K, and it seems like when the deck is shown that way, it's replaced with a different kind of deck. Do you?
You're talking about,
Let me. There's one is highlighted and the other one is unhighlighted.
I think they did change.
A deck and stairway right here, and
Yeah.
that's going to be built as proposed and as approved originally. This is a new, I think there was another deck here, and so that's being shifted around to over here.
Yeah,
Okay, so-
see it.
Yeah, and all of these, as Jen noted, all of the stairs as they've been built all the way around are smaller than originally shown. So we're decreasing impervious area, but,
Getting closer to the wetland line.
well, this is getting farther away.
That one
This
is, yeah.
What's here is around the corner now.
The reason I asked the question is it seems like, you know, you've got a pattern of, well, especially in building H and I, you've got a pattern of changing the decks from the style that was originally shown to a different style. And then you've got building K here with a deck that is consistent with the original submittal and the original approved deck. It stands to reason that you would be tempted at least to change it. I just want to know what your...
Well, in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, as we've been going through this whole iteration, Tim went to the architect who's been drawing the plans and confirmed that, you know, we don't want to come back to you in a month from
Said get
now.
it all on there.
Yeah, that's my point.
And his comment was leave the one that you're talking about where it is. It functions fine, and shift the other one around. So,
All right. It's on the record.
Any more questions?
No, thank you.
None? No questions. All right. So where do we go from here?
So I've heard outside of, well, I think we do need a modification to accept the plans, whether we do it as Lou recommended, that each individual change be recorded as a modification, or that they submit one for everything, is something the commission needs to decide. And the only other, because again, this is under an enforcement order, the enforcement order only required the plans to be submitted. We didn't go beyond that in in what was required. So what's been submitted, if confirmed to be accurate, then needs to be acted upon in some way, either as recommended as a modification.
But we have several modifications here.
Right.
We do.
So we've only ever done modifications in mass, but as a penalty, I hear you're saying submit them separately. That's up to you. The only other thing I heard was, since we've lost buffer zone to wetland, because they're, with the replication area, the buffer zone, what was to be buffer zone is now replication area and will be wetland, requiring a more permanent barrier, which, I think we went with the post and rail. This was a 40B, but if you, again, it would be somewhat punitive to require the more regular bylaw stone wall in that, I would recommend in that particular area.
Let me make a comment if I can, because I think Jack brought an interesting issue that I didn't really think about. What the green shrubs and fence line represent, as I've noted, is exactly what was shown on the originally approved plan. And Jen had noted they weren't there and asked that they be added. So but the way because the wetland triangle here was filled, there's the possibility certainly of extending this down and around and bringing that up and connecting this buffer to this shrub line to this shrub line at a minimum. And it simply didn't occur to me because I simply popped that layer onto the drawing thing. But the restoration is going to be right here, so there's lawn area, and that could certainly be. We could restrict that area with no real.
But that was supposed to be originally a retaining
The
wall.
only thing is, you gotta,
This was going to be
poor
retaining
person
wall.
coming down the steps is gonna run right into the fence.
Well, yeah, but you've got that issue up here too.
Yeah, I know, I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. At least the original location of the steps, they were coming down parallel with the fence. At least now they're walking down to the fence and they bump into the fence before they get a chance to turn and walk one way or the
We
other.
give them 24 inches. Well, there's just a suggestion. I'm just.
Yeah.
Well, we would, the fence encompasses the entire site. We would connect the fence. We would bring it up and back and around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
it would all connect. That was what the whole intent was.
It would look better too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys don't want holes in
The fence would come
the-
across and it would come back up and connect to the fence by eye.
Yeah, because otherwise that would represent about a 50-foot long gap. And
How come you didn't build the original plan deck and stairs behind H? Instead of putting these smaller ones out that go right into up against the fence?
We ended up with behind H, there are half walkouts, so we were able to get some windows in. That's the reason why the stairs aren't going parallel.
I mean, the fence issue aside, I kind of see three modifications requested as part of this revised proposal. One having to do with the restoration areas, a second having to do with the stormwater management changes, the flared end pieces, and a third having to do with the decks. So is that what you kind of had in mind, Lou?
Yeah, well, there's moving the dissipators, there's,
yeah, I was going to say associated with the flared end pieces or the flow dissipators
right.
and the relocation of those.
So I'm thinking there's more like 5, but again, Jen can
I would say 4. So mitigation for the fill, stormwater changes, dissipators and outlets is stormwater, decks, and then buffer zone alteration.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know of anything else.
what's up, need some feedback from the commission. How do you feel about that?
It sounds consistent. Sounds like it makes sense.
Agree. You know, I'm going to defer to you guys on a lot of this stuff because, you know, I was recused from being on, you know, dealing with this back when it was in its original stages, and I missed the last couple meetings. But what you're saying, and it sounds reasonable to me based upon where we're at today.
Doug?
So,
Okay. So that's how, if we're going to approve the modification, we're going to approve it as after-the-fact modifications.
So we'll require them to submit 4 after-the-fact modifications for approval.
Right, and Lisa's fine with the changes.
Cheers. I think the bigger thing to them is that they can probably now move forward with their continued construction in accordance with all of the otherwise designed and unchanged plans.
I have another question. How many more foundations had to go? 2?
The hole I have dug is 1,
Right.
2, and then I have 2 single units.
The other day
So
when
really-
I happened to be going by the next hole
Mhm.
is ledge.
Yeah, it's all ledge.
It's all ledge. Isn't there a detention pond right next to that? Or a retention pond?
No.
No, it's just a
That's the
line.
There's no
existing
buffer zone
isolated
there?
wetland that the feds made them keep.
Right, that IBW that's right beside the trailer, from there down 114 is just a series of units.
Existing wetlands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your plan with that? You gonna blast or you gonna drill?
No, we've been
Yeah.
drilling
There's no
and
blasting.
hammering.
Hammond?
Yeah.
It takes days and days for every.
I saw that knob sticking out the side and I went,
Yeah.
oh boy.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
It's a deep blue ledge.
Yeah. Do you still don't feel like you have surplus material for backfill?
We have been trucking material off-site.
Yeah, that's what you allowed them to do last
Yeah, a
meeting.
lot of it's gone now.
Okay.
There's not a lot of storage material up there.
Okay.
So,
I guess we'll see the modified plan when it comes in, but do you intend to close that gap in the fence behind
Yes.
building H2?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that would be similar to what's proposed, the post and rail with vegetated barrier behind it?
the vegetated barrier actually runs the whole distance now, they just don't show the fence there.
And the next, you're gonna send a modified plan? Will it have elevations and distances?
Well, if they overlay it on the existing proposed plans, I guess the thing you don't have is elevations in the filled areas.
No. We have not done that.
So you need that for the
Yeah,
as-built.
I'd like to know where that water's coming from, you know, it's treated, but especially the one coming between H and I and the
I mean,
other
I would
between
say
F and-
they all slope down. There's no doubt about it. They 100% all slope to the wetland. There's no issues about that. I guess the only thing I would say is that's probably best reflected in the as-built. I mean, it is an alteration and a change, and if you want to see it, I'm not going to say you shouldn't, but we have photos, Patrick's monitoring photos. That was where the big concern came, is that those things slope right off straight to the wetland, and Heidi was saying these shouldn't be right up against that erosion control this way, and that's where things started to be questioned around the H&I building. Because they were going right up to the wetland versus being where you see the green line of vegetation. Is that gonna make excavating for that, the blue, the replication difficult? I mean,
No,
that won't
we-
be too steep of a cut?
No, we talked about that before we proposed anything. They can get a little mini machine in there, and it's not a huge amount of effort apparently. You agree?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
most of that area north of H is 2 grade of the existing.
Right, but it goes right down to the hay bales in the wetland. It existing wasn't like that, so.
Correct.
So I'm just worried, I can't picture the fill behind I, because there was a
Yeah.
wall in there, so.
The
You think behind I is natural grade down to the wetland? 'Cause
No,
there's
not behind I. No, I'm talking about over at H.
Right, so at I, if you have to excavate out for that wetland,
Yeah,
drawing back to where the fence line is,
Uh-huh.
what kind of slope is that gonna be?
from the fence line to the wetland?
To the wetland? Are you gonna need a wall?
No, I think that'd probably be like a 2-to-1.
That's steep.
Yeah, the steepness is more behind H than it is I.
That's why I like elevation, because so I can,
Yeah, I don't think it's that steep.
Yeah.
it's just, it's much more easy to picture when you can see the elevation.
So the elevations between, behind H and I for the revised plan?
Yeah, I would. I'd
You're
like,
talking about proposal.
Propose what it'll look like when they're done.
yeah. Yeah, existing doesn't mean anything. It's when they're gonna be finished what it looks like.
Okay.
This will have something to go back on when you do the as-built. We don't have anything now. Once it comes to the as-built, that's the way it's gonna stay. If we have any questions now, we don't have anything to fall back on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't you agree that we should have elevations on
Yeah.
Well, especially around that change.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
On slopes of-
the two changes
Yeah.
between F and H where the new restoration area is and where the proposed restoration is of a height. Because we don't have, right now, everything's
So how do we do this? Do we amend the enforcement order or issue a new enforcement order? I mean, this is a requirement. Do we just require them? It's not like they're not going to do it, so,
no, I would leave the enforcement order in place.
until they submit the revised modification,
Yeah.
or the after-the-fact modifications, 4 of them. Restoration areas, stormwater, decks, and buffer zone.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we get a brief memo from you?
Yep, I have it summarized.
And also the grades and everything.
Well, that won't be it. Oh,
That'll be
that'll a
including
condition.
proposed grades, right?
Yeah.
And setback, you want the setbacks?
Setbacks. I don't know if that's the word for it on this, but yeah.
Well, setbacks are, to the
Distances
existing
from the
buildings
building,
are, we didn't, I don't know that we did we do setbacks to stairs?
No.
It
Yeah, I'm
might
not sure
be
what you
on-
mean by setbacks.
Well, what the new setbacks
just
are
distance
versus the old. So where the stairs have
from
moved closer,
structures.
put the new setbacks on.
Distance from the stairs to the wetland.
To the wetland.
Versus the old.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I got a question on building J. How high is the deck above the shrubbery? The corner?
I believe it'll be coming out of the second floor, so it's probably up at 10 feet.
No,
9
that's,
to 10.
no,
Get rid of
that's,
that
no,
deck,
that's
right?
that's the rear exit.
Ground
for-
floor.
That, for
Okay.
ground floor.
So you get some,
That's,
That's not
well,
that-
there's
that's high
half a
off the
walk
ground.
out there, well, no, it's 4, 5, it'll be roughly 5 feet off of the ground.
how tall is the shrubbery? How tall is the fence? 3 feet?
The fence is probably 3 feet, yeah.
Yeah, 2.5, 3. Nothing.
So you go right into the corner with the column for the supporting the deck.
We can shift a couple of those bushes and,
The type of
The deck really doesn't go to the corner of the building, it's probably off the corner by about 3 feet.
yeah.
Yeah, but there's a conflict shown on the plan. There appears to be a conflict.
We'll treat that, thank you.
Look more closely at that.
Well, that's gonna continue then, so I might be here for another modification. Falling apart here. All right, so we're all, so we have to continue
So
this?
What about
That was
Jack?
this one.
I think they just file it for the
File
next
it.
meeting. You have, the next meeting is
Bring it up.
September 11th, I think? 11th? No, 14th.
Could we move forward with pouring the foundation of,
Oh, so
of the cell hole that's
They
open.
want you to remove the cease and desist from the enforcement order.
I'm going to defer to the,
I would say, once you have filed the modification,
Sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a, you have the plan, I think it's.
It seems like the
Can get it in.
foundation locations aren't a problem. Marty's pretty good
Plan
at making those
It's not gonna happen
accurate.
quickly.
I think you can file the modification immediately. Just file it.
well,
You have to get the grades on, but they can file, you can file the modification, the request for modification.
The plan you're talking about.
Right. What you want modified, you have the plan for. You can add the fence on, but
Sure.
you can add the
But you're
grades for
looking
the
for
meeting.
grading.
But you can add the grades for the meeting. I think
Okay.
you can, if you're looking for time, I don't think filing the modification is the holdup to the time. It's the fee, the plan, and the narrative, most of which you have.
And then, as far as the modified work being completed with the replication area, are we putting any time parameters on that, or just we'll look at it when it comes in for a P?
Well, I can tell you what we have
CRC?
talked about, and that's that it would be done this year.
I would think that, I can,
They got occup-
that's what I was saying of,
Yeah.
well, I would,
We need to approve the modification first, and then.
Yeah, probably the sequence, the work sequence will be that the grading will be done almost immediately. The replication area will be the last thing, because that can't really happen until
and I think,
October, ideally.
and they have to monitor for 2 full years following the work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
It
in
can
the
be
order of
shaped.
conditions, that
Right.
replication needs to be, I'll check the order to make sure the order complies with their process.
Is this a lot, this is part of the last phase, right?
This is phase 4.
This is.
No, or is this 3?
No, this is phase,
Yeah.
behind H&I is phase 3.
Okay, so it's the end of phase 3, I guess.
So if we run in a situation where that work's not completed, what it's, again, I wasn't involved in the original meetings because I was a butter, but what's the bond we have on this?
What do we have left, 80?
Do you know?
It's 100,000, I think.
Was it?
I think it's 80. I mean,
80 plus 30 plus.
is it over 100 now?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I can check. It's
Don't we
it's a
have-
significant amount of
Is it
money.
one phase supposed to be completed before we start another?
We did away with the phasing as we got to the end of this project. That was a modification. We didn't get away with it. We didn't do away with it, but we changed it such that they're in the last phase now, and everything outside of this phase is pretty much constructed. But I guess what I would recommend is modify the enforcement order, amend the enforcement order to require the submittal of the modification, detail the 4 things that are required in the modification, allow, once the modification is submitted, for them to continue work, lift the cease and desist, I should say. And then 3 would just be to outline that the replication areas the new replication areas shall be monitored as was previously required in the order of conditions. So that would be my recommendation, is to modify the EO, or amend.
All right, so we're gonna make a motion to lift the enforcement order after receiving.
No, amend the EO to
Right.
require the modifications after the fact. Lift the EO once modifications submitted.
Lift the certificate.
I'm sorry, lift, not the EO, the cease and desist, and require monitoring of replication per the original order of conditions of the new replication. So
Okay.
that's a potential vote if you
All right,
agree.
motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Okay.
Generally, you have multiple copies of this.
You can leave me one, I don't have
Okay,
one.
this is one.
Thank you.
You want me to keep her the copy, Deb?
Tomorrow.
Keep it. I don't know, bring it in.
Bring it next time,
I will bring it
because they'll be
next
here
time.
next time.
Yes, I will. Unless you want to take the plan off.
Some color on it with my crayon.
Thank you.
Decisions, 2426, and 2426, and 85, you vote the same, so.
So you have my special condition denial in front of you. I did consult town council about the part of it that has to do with filing under the bylaw. Basically, we're saying that there's no additional burden on the applicant to file under the bylaw. They already notified abutters. And the performance standards for the two areas in which they're working, there are no additional performance standards under the bylaw. So I guess just to be consistent with the position we may take with Mass DOT, we should probably leave that in there. That was something I originally thought would be subjective, but, and then the rest is a denial. And I did have Joe review it because he was also very involved in the floodplain issue. Is based on performance standards for floodplain and riverfront area.
And citing the DEP comments.
Yep, I also relied upon the MACC handbook has some NDEP's guidance on drafting a denial. They both exist, and I utilize them.
So they try to do this as a limited project, and you guys had determined it is
I don't
not.
think the limited project aspect of it is the biggest thing. I don't think it's a limited project, and we discussed that briefly, but that's hardly the basis for denying. I think the major basis for denying was their inability to deal with the performance standards associated with bordering land subject to flooding. No provisions for providing compensatory storage or dealing with the alternatives, both limited project and the riverfront area. Well, they did provide alternatives. It was kind of the market basket scenario. We can do it, we can not do it, or we can give you this one culvert. And those were the alternatives.
Yeah.
So I think the alternatives analysis was limited. So I cite all of the, I mean, we left no stone unturned. We cited all of the reasons we discussed during the hearing process. We never received any additional submittals.
I'll go to the definition of road.
What's that?
Goes to the definition of road.
Oh, yeah, to the definition of road, too.
A rail road.
Rail, road. I don't know. Maybe that's why.
See how the courts determine the definition of road in these instances.
I don't really know. But that was just, I don't even think the limited project statute actually stands on whether this is a road or not. It stands further on their inability to provide any alternatives or mitigation, which are also required.
But they refuse to address. They say our solution is the only solution that was going to work.
Right.
And we refuse to consider any others, or even to provide an analysis that says there's a negative, the effect is nil on the flooding.
And so I just reviewed, I had to draft and finalize the minutes of the hearing of the 27th tonight, and I can't tell you how many times Jack says in those minutes, your justification must be in writing, and to which we never received. And also, recommendations by each member of the commission as to what alternatives could or should be considered. And to each of those considerations, the majority of his denial was it was a customer service convenience issue for the railroad to consider any of those other alternatives, which is not what you are charged with reviewing or upholding. So.
And he refused, the second meeting, he actually refused to address the comments by DEP.
Right, so when he came back on 8/10, he just had a statement that he wished for the commission to close and issue an
the
order
funny
of
part
conditions.
is that I suspect if someone does a floodplain analysis, they're going to find that the proposed changes have a relatively minor effect, if any, on the floodplain elevations that would be determined. And if they came and presented that as an analysis, you would say, fine, there's no issue.
I actually wrote that statement up in your minutes of what you said on July
So-
27th, that if someone would just do the analysis and provide it for us, that
So if they
it could be
refuse
that
to
it would
do
be,
that-
your exact words were, it's probably minute, but nobody ever provided any additional information.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
here we are. So if you, I've never actually written a denial in my 8 years with you, so I think it's a vote to issue, a denial, and you sign the paperwork
Well,
and
then it goes to the state and let them play with it.
let them have
Right. The
MBTA.
ball in their court. All right, motion to denial.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
And one abstention.
One abstention.
I was not, I'm not up to speed on this project, and I don't want to have that affect your vote,
Very good.
or any appeal, that's for sure.
Okay.
All right, all set. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
9 o'clock.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?